One crisp winter day, as the year drew to a close, I received a frantic call from Linda, my son's stepdaughter. She begged me to come over immediately. I drove to my son Mike's house, realizing I hadn't visited in quite some time. Sarah. Grandma. Sarah sat huddled on the concrete steps, still in her school tracksuit, shivering visibly. "Why are you out here in such thin clothes? Where are your parents?" "They went abroad with my sister." "What? Never mind. Get in the car. You're freezing." I quickly ushered Sarah into my car and bought her a hot drink from the nearest convenience store. Back at my house, Linda filled me in on the whole story. As I listened, anger towards Mike and his wife bubbled up inside me. Since they relied on me, I knew I had to step up for these kids. "Linda, do you have keys to their house?" "Yes." "Good. Let's go there now and grab the essentials." "What are you planning, Grandma?" I couldn't help but chuckle. "We won't be needing that house anymore, will we?" "My name is Mary Smith. I'm 64 years old. 2 years ago, I lost my husband and now live alone. Still, my days are far from empty. I'm kept busy managing the legacy my husband left behind. 40 years ago, I married into an old, established family in a rural area. I never imagined I'd end up running this grand house. My childhood home was within commuting distance of New York City. My husband and I were college sweethearts. We tied the knot right after graduation, and I moved to this unfamiliar town, relying entirely on him. It was jarring to see my husband, who had been just another student like me, suddenly treated as the local dignitary's heir. My mother-in-law, with her deep-rooted ideas about the region, took it upon herself to teach me how to support him. Though exhausting, I understood her reasoning. Now, even with everyone else gone, I'm still viewed as the caretaker of this house and land. Back when I got married, people were flocking to big cities like New York. So my choice to move to a rural area raised eyebrows. My mother-in-law probably trained me so rigorously to quickly dispel such judgments. Shortly after our wedding, I had a child. A son, which delighted everyone, including my mother-in-law. However, after giving birth, my health declined, and we ended up having only one child. This became a regret of mine later in life. As time passed, my son married, my in-laws and husband passed away, and I found myself managing this house and land alone. I've been left with enough passive income to maintain the large property and live comfortably. Of course, some knowledge and help from staff are necessary for upkeep. Thanks to my mother-in-law's rigorous training and my habit of continuous learning, I manage without being deceived by relatives or associates. Sometimes I have to learn new things at my age, but that adds purpose to my life. There's one crucial reason why I must manage everything diligently. My husband left all his assets to me in his will. Why? It was because of our son Mike's character. Normally, the inheritance would have been split equally between Mike and me. But my husband chose a different path. For years before he passed, he would say, "If we give him half now, this house will crumble. I need you to see if Mike will ever change." I took my husband's words to heart. Around that time, Mike had taken a second wife. Just 6 months after his first wife, Sarah, passed away from a long-term illness, Mike married his mistress. My husband, already in declining health, was shocked by our son's behavior, which further deteriorated his condition. Mike had seemed like a promising heir until then, getting married and settling down. We probably spoiled him too much as the only heir. Not just me, but the whole family. Mike excelled in school and attended a good college in Nebraska. He could have aimed for a university in New York City, but chose to stay local. After graduation, he secured a job at a friend's company and married a local girl. At that point, Mike expressed a desire for independence. So, we built a house on a piece of land we owned for the young couple. Mike and Sarah seemed to live very happily. However, after their daughter Sarah was born, Sarah fell ill. The doctors told them they couldn't have any more children. Remembering my own struggles, I did everything I could for Sarah. Her own mother often visited, and we arranged for sitters and housekeepers. Sarah's health improved somewhat during this time, but 10 years later, she was diagnosed with cancer. Looking back, Sarah was incredibly resilient, perhaps feeling guilty about causing concern early in their marriage. She endured more than she should have. By the time they discovered her cancer, it was already too late. Sarah passed away with little Sarah clinging to her side. I was devastated in so many ways. Above all, I had come to think of Sarah as my own daughter, and my heart ached for my granddaughter, Sarah. Losing her mother was truly heartbreaking. But there was something else weighing heavily on my mind. While Sarah was in hospice care, Mike was already involved with a mistress. Because of this, he rarely visited Sarah. Mike remarried less than 6 months after Sarah's passing. His new wife, Patricia, was a woman from a club Mike frequented. Shockingly, they had been together for over 5 years by then. In the diary Sarah left for me, she documented the days when Mike stopped coming home. Perhaps she intended to use it as evidence for a divorce someday. We'll never know now that she's gone. Patricia, 2 years Mike's senior, moved into the house we had built for them, bringing her daughter Linda, who is 6 years older than Sarah. Naturally, I opposed this marriage. Mike had betrayed Sarah, carried on a long affair, neglected his sick wife, and then quickly remarried. I never imagined my son could be so callous. But Mike shamelessly declared, "I married Sarah because you and Dad arranged it. Isn't that enough of a duty fulfilled?" Sarah broke down before having a son to carry on the family name. What's the point of being married to a woman who can't even fulfill her marital duties? I need to release my stress somewhere, or it affects my work. I always sensed Mike's coldness towards Sarah, but his words were beyond cruel. I blamed myself. When had Mike become such a person? Did we spoil him because he was an only child? Both my husband and I did, indeed. And everyone else pampered him as the son of a prominent family. Still, we had taught him right from wrong when he was young. Because of these thoughts, I hadn't visited Mike's house for a while. I was also preoccupied after my husband's death. They only came over during the holidays. But that was my mistake. It was a day near the year's end. December's weather had been erratic, with warm, muggy days followed by sudden cold, blustery ones. It was challenging for someone my age. Still, it was the end of the year. While handling various reports, my personal phone rang unexpectedly. Who could it be? The number was unfamiliar, but it was my personal phone. Only a few people knew the number, so I decided to answer it. "Hello, is this Sarah's grandmother?" It was a young woman's voice. "Yes, I am. Who is this?" "I'm sorry to bother you. This is Linda, Patricia's daughter." Why was she calling me? "I don't have much time, but can you come to our house right away?" Where was she calling from? There was a lot of background noise. Why, what's going on? I understand it's hard to trust a call from me, but we don't have time. I'll explain later. Sorry. Linda abruptly ended the call, leaving me in a daze. Fortunately, I had some free time. I hurried outside to my car, and a biting, dry wind stung my cheeks. The temperature had plummeted since yesterday, a fact I only now registered. I drove to my son's house, a place I hadn't visited in quite some time. The spacious driveway, which could accommodate 4 cars, had 2 vehicles parked. Perhaps Mike was home. I exited my car and approached the front door. Sarah. Grandma. I rushed over. Sarah sat huddled on the concrete steps, still in her school tracksuit, arms wrapped tightly around her knees against the cold. Why are you out here in such thin clothes? Where are your parents? They went abroad with my sister. What? Something felt terribly wrong. Never mind that now. Get in the car. You're freezing. I quickly ushered Sarah into my vehicle, then bought her a hot drink from the nearest convenience store. She was chilled to the bone. Sarah carefully warmed her hands before opening the drink, sipping slowly. I wanted to ask what had happened immediately, but getting home safely took precedence. Once home, I led Sarah to the living room. I called the housekeeper, requesting 2 hot teas and some snacks. As we entered the warm room, Sarah's visible relief gave me an unsettling feeling. Feeling better? Yes. She seemed younger than I remembered, even though she was now 14. When she had cried by her mother's bedside, her wrists had seemed healthier. Her wrists, her hands. Sarah, what happened to your hands? Her hands were chapped and cracked. It reminded me of my own childhood, though such conditions are rare now. Oh, it started last year. It looks painful. Are you using any cream? No, I don't have any. It's probably from cleaning the bath, washing dishes with hot water, and doing laundry. What? Isn't the housekeeper helping? Dad fired her, said it cost too much, and told me to do it. And what about Patricia? She's busy with other things, and Dad doesn't want her to ruin her hands. What about your sister? Sis. I gently interrupted her. Did someone tell you to call her that? Sarah nodded silently. Dad told me to call her that in public. At home, I call her Linda. I prefer that. All right, then please call her Linda. Okay, also, she's not my mom, Grandma. Dad said to call her Madam. If I don't, I get hit. Sarah gave a bitter smile. My mind reeled. What on earth had been happening? In that house while I stayed away. After eating about half of the cake, Sarah suddenly remembered something and pulled out a smartphone from her tracksuit pocket. It was a simple model, the kind a grade schooler might have. Sarah began typing a message. What are you doing? Linda told me to let her know when I arrived at your place, Grandma. Linda? Yeah, she bought me this phone. What happened to your old one? A while after Dad remarried, Patricia said it was too soon for me to have one and took it away. I felt a surge of anger, Patricia, I presumed. Did Dad say anything about it? Sarah shrugged her shoulders and made a face. Dad doesn't know anything about me. When I couldn't contact my friends, Linda bought me this phone, saying sorry it's not the latest model. She also told me to make sure no one finds it. Make sure no one finds it. Who, Patricia, of course. Grandma, Linda just replied. She's on her way from the airport. What? I thought she went on the trip abroad with them. She said to pretend she was going, but would come back. She found a way to slip out. What kind of arrangement did those two have? All I could do was wait. 3 hours later, Linda arrived at my house, having taken a train and bus back from the airport. It's a rural town, so it takes time to get back even from the nearest airport. I'm sorry for the sudden call, Mrs. Smith. Thank you for picking up Sarah right away. Linda bowed deeply to me. Mrs. Smith. You call me Mrs. Smith. It would be presumptuous to call you Grandma. Her tone was firm, her gaze unwavering. Though she looked like Patricia, there was something strong in her. You're Sarah's grandmother, not mine. All right, call me whatever you like. So, what happened with Mike and Patricia, the trip? They said we'd go on a trip together, but I didn't know what would happen, so I faked being sick to get away. They're planning to travel from Korea to Southeast Asia for 3 weeks. 3 weeks? What about work? This seemed worse than I thought. My mother planned to offer me to that man during the trip. What do you mean? Exactly that. He had his eyes on both my mother and me. Unbelievable. Grandma, it's true, Sarah said, clenching her fists and sitting next to Linda. When I finished cleaning the bath, I saw Dad persistently asking Linda to join him several times. Linda always managed to brush it off as a joke, but Dad would get angry, curse, and yell at me to get lost. No, Sarah, you being there kept things from getting worse. I was always worried you'd get hurt. It's terrifying to think what could have happened if you hadn't been there. What on earth had happened to my son? How far had he fallen? I sat in silence, watching the two of them defend each other. These two were more than just friends. They were allies against a common enemy. So, how do you two usually manage, Sarah? You mentioned you're told to call Patricia Madam. Yes, my mom got involved with Mike for the money, then married him and settled in. I saw him coming over during my high school years and his growing inappropriate interest in me. Now that we live in the same house, he's gotten worse. I hate it. Linda hugged herself, looking genuinely repulsed. The only good thing was that I could go to college between school and work. I stayed away from home as much as possible. I thought about leaving. Linda stayed because of me. Sarah interrupted. Even today, those two left me alone, without keys, and told me to go wherever. They didn't give me any money. And in just a tracksuit, with the wind making it feel even colder. I remembered her huddled, hugging her knees. I waited because Linda told me to. She said to wait until she was sure they were on the plane and wouldn't come back. That's why you called me. Yes, I stayed near them until the last minute, but I was worried Sarah would catch a cold, so I called you. I'm sorry it was still so cold. In hindsight, she could have contacted me earlier, but the young ones wanted to be certain those two were out of the country first. Linda, do you have keys to that house? Yes. Then let's go. Take only what's essential. What are you planning, Grandma? I couldn't help but chuckle. We won't be needing that house anymore, will we? 3 weeks later, after the New Year. When work and school had resumed, 2 people with suitcases burst into my house. Mom, what is the meaning of this? Mike yelled at me as soon as he walked in. They had apparently returned to their house. And then they saw it, only to find it empty. What do you mean? What is this? Those were my things. I decided they were unnecessary. So I had the house demolished and sold the land. Your belongings are in this storage unit. I had immediately contacted a trusted real estate agent and demolition company. Knowing the situation, they helped me act quickly. I tossed the storage unit key to Mike. He missed it, and it clattered to the floor. Are you out of your mind, Mom? That was my house. How so? What do you mean, how so? Mike, you're mistaken. That house was built for you, but it was in our name. Now it's mine. I can do whatever I want with it. What's the problem? What about the girls? What did you do with them? The girls, Patricia. Are you seriously asking that? I laughed through my nose. Well, come on in, I said, letting the 2 of them inside. What? Not the living room? Mike asked. I silently led them. Our destination was the large room in the back. Sorry to keep you waiting, I said, opening the sliding door. Inside, a dozen or so people were waiting. But what caught Mike and Patricia's eyes first were Sarah, Linda, seated in the place of honor. Next to where I would sit were my grandchildren. Linda, why did you ignore my calls? Sarah, did you tattle on me to your grandmother? When did you get so cunning? Mike and Patricia, faces flushed with anger, tried to approach the kids. But the house staff restrained them and seated them across from us. Still, Mike and Patricia, breathing heavily, seemed oblivious to who else was in the room. Well, now that everyone's here, I began, looking around at the assembly. Let's begin, please. Go ahead, I said to the first speaker. Thank you. Hello, Mike. Welcome back from your extended vacation, but there won't be any more in the future. Mike turned his head to the left, startled. Executive. His current boss, though speaking calmly, wasn't smiling. I didn't expect you to request a 3-week leave. I thought you'd have outgrown this bad habit by now. Mike shrank back at the low, commanding voice. He was always tough on those beneath him, but weak before his superiors. A trait he had since childhood. But sir, you always approved it before. Mike, do you understand your value to this company? What? If you don't, I'll tell you. Your value was in being the heir to a prominent family in this city. Mike gritted his teeth. But that's no longer relevant. What do you mean? His boss turned to me. Mike, I said, looking him straight in the eyes. He averted his gaze. I plan to announce my will, which was written under your lawyer's supervision. A will? Yes, to prevent my estate from going to you. I needed to write it in advance. Mom, it's already stored securely. It's simple. If anything happens to me, all my assets go to Sarah. Mike's jaw dropped. After a few seconds, he sputtered. No, I must have misheard. My ears must still be off from the flight. No, you heard correctly. Our family lawyer interjected. The previous head removed Mike from the inheritance after observing his abilities and spending habits. I remember his words clearly, the lawyer said. That's right at that time. Mike stammered. Just remembering now, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. The company executive continued, taking over from me and the lawyer. As you can see, Mrs. Smith has decided to strip you of your inheritance rights. Therefore, there's no reason for our company to treat you specially. No way. Our company's interest was in maintaining ties with a prominent family in this region. Not your personal abilities. Now, what to do next? The executive glanced at me. I nodded slightly. Feel free to proceed as you see fit. Thank you, Mike. Your request for a 3-week vacation has spread throughout the company. The higher-ups are planning to demote and reassign you. Be grateful that's all they're doing. With that, Mike collapsed to the floor, seemingly drained of all strength. This is absurd. Patricia leaned forward. Mrs. Smith, if Sarah is the heir, what about Linda? Isn't she also Mike's child? Linda, why would you think that? Legally, she's Mike's child too, right? Isn't that why she's sitting next to you? Stop embarrassing yourself, Mom. Linda interjected sharply. Embarrassing myself. I'm not biologically related to this family at all. What makes you think I have any rights here? Are you dense? How dare you speak to your parent like that? I've been leaving voicemails asking when you'd join us on the trip. And you never responded. That's right, we were eagerly waiting. Mike added. Eagerly waiting. Linda pulled out her phone. Excuse me, everyone, please listen to this. The room buzzed with curiosity. Come on, Linda, today's the day. Take a bath with me, won't you? Sorry, I have to work. You can't listen to your father. A dull thud, likely from hitting the washing machine. Dad, stop, Linda doesn't want to. Shut up. A scream from Sarah, followed by a loud thump. Sarah. Linda, you have to get to work. Hurry. Thank you. Footsteps echoed, followed by the sound of a door closing and more commotion. So, what the girls had told me was just the tip of the iceberg. What's this? Someone asked. That's Mike's voice, right? Everyone looked back and forth between Linda, Sarah, and Mike. Linda stopped the recording and spoke firmly. This is just a part of it. I've always felt this danger, and Sarah helped protect me by cleaning the bath and toilet. Not just this time, but always letting me know when he was back. How did you manage that? Sarah silently glared at Patricia and took out her smartphone. I thought I took your phone away. Patricia snaps. Patricia, did you just admit you took her phone? I asked. Even elementary school kids need phones nowadays, and you took it from Sarah, a middle schooler. Mom, it's for her education. Yes, they don't need the latest model. Then at least a basic phone. Kids need to message friends and receive school notifications. Did you even get the school update? I'm busy. I don't have time for her school events. Busy with what? Linda laughed quietly. What's so funny, Linda? How dare you laugh at your parent? Busy tricking men as usual. What? Mike turned his gaze to Patricia. Mr. Thomas, please come in. Linda called out. The sliding door opened, revealing a man slightly younger than Mike and another man in a suit. What? Patricia's expression changed dramatically. Long time no see, Patricia. Never thought I'd see you here after you ruined my life. Why are you here? Everyone, this is Mr. Thomas. He's one of Patricia's victims, someone she scammed out of money. Oh, Linda, you mean there are more victims? I asked. Yes, this woman has scammed many men, but Mr. Thomas had it the worst. He was the most decent man. Mr. Thomas, please tell everyone what she did to you. Yes, Mr. Thomas, what did Patricia do? I asked. Marriage fraud and theft, he said. The room buzzed with whispers. What are you talking about? You gave me the money. Patricia snapped. I believed your story about wanting to open a store and went along with it, Mr. Thomas said, glaring at Patricia. You said you needed money for a deposit on a good property. I withdrew my savings and gave it to you. The next day, you disappeared. Do you have proof? Linda took out her phone and played another recording. Let's go quickly. What's the rush? We took a lot of money from Thomas, so we need to leave town fast. Patricia slammed the table. How did you? I've always been ready to drag you down, Linda said coldly. How dare you talk to your mother like that? You stopped being my mother when you started hitting me and withholding food. And you planned to pimp me out during this trip, didn't you? I'm your mother. I can do whatever I want. Apparently, child abuse isn't in your dictionary. The man standing behind Mr. Thomas stood up. Basically, you still have many skeletons in your closet, the man said, taking out a police badge. Patricia jumped back in surprise. Why is the police here? You fool, Mr. Thomas is pressing charges for fraud and theft. Isn't that right? Yes, Linda found me and arranged this meeting, Patricia. You should give up now. I'll testify in detail about the fraud, theft, and child abuse. There are things I can't even say here, Linda said firmly. I heard Sarah gulp. No wonder Linda didn't want Sarah to go through the same thing she did. I'll testify to everything she did to me, no matter how small. I hate remembering it. But if it puts you behind bars, it's worth it. What a strong girl. My son turned out to be a worthless man, and he married a horrible woman. But I'm grateful to have met this child. In the end, Mike and Patricia divorced. It's ridiculous, but money truly was the bond between them. When Mike visited Patricia at the police station, they hurled insults at each other. Patricia's crimes were uncovered through the evidence Linda had collected, audio recordings, photos, and more. The police informed me that Linda had suffered horrific child abuse, much worse than we had imagined. Hearing this, I resolved to do everything I could for Linda. But she insisted she only needed help finding a job after graduation. So, I decided to find her the best job possible. As for Mike, he was demoted and transferred as the company executive had said. He was sent to a branch office out of state. His new position was manager. It was apparently too difficult to demote him from a director to a regular employee. So, they placed him in a position where he could cause the least damage, and it was somewhere out of state where he had never been. In the end, it was this place, with our protection, that ruined him. As a mother, I could only hope he'd become a better person outside. Though I wasn't optimistic. As for us, it's wonderful to have the sound of children in the house again. Now, I live in this large house with my granddaughter and her stepsister. I arranged for Linda to work as an assistant for Sarah, who will inherit the house. Linda agreed to this. If Mrs. Smith needs me, I'll get whatever qualifications are necessary. With Linda by her side, Sarah's future looks secure. Still, given her past, Linda might have flashbacks to the abuse. I'll support these two for as long as needed. To do that, I must stay healthy. Mike, the source of so much trouble, and that parasitic woman were hard to deal with because he was my son. These children worked hard to remove them. Now, I want them to enjoy a life appropriate for their age.